Here's something strange. There's a specific kind of experience that tends to show up in people's lives right before everything changes. Not after the breakthrough, not during it, but in the quiet stretch just before it. And almost no one recognizes it while it's happening. People going through it usually assume nothing is moving. They assume the waiting means something has gone wrong, that they've been forgotten, or that they misjudged something fundamental along the way. But when you look at what people describe in the period just before a major shift in their lives, something unexpected keeps appearing. The same quiet signs, over and over, across completely different circumstances. They're not dramatic. They don't announce themselves. And that's exactly why most people miss them. So, here's the question worth holding as you watch this. What if the signs that your patience is close to paying off aren't loud or obvious but already present, hiding inside experiences you've already had? That question is going to matter more by the end of this. But first, if you've been waiting a long time, there's something you need to hear. If you've been carrying a quiet kind of tired lately, not burned out exactly, but worn from hoping without proof, from holding on without knowing why, you're not imagining that, and you're not alone. A lot of people feel this in what later turns out to be the final stretch before something real shifts. They don't know it's the final stretch. It just feels like more waiting. But looking back, they can point to specific things that were happening during that period. Things that made no sense at the time, but made complete sense afterward. That's what we're going to look at. And I'd be surprised if at least one of these doesn't stop you. Sign number 1. You've stopped forcing things. There was probably a time when you were gripping every situation tightly, running every variable, pushing every angle, exhausting yourself trying to make something happen through sheer force of will. You know what that feels like. But somewhere recently, maybe gradually, maybe in a single moment, you almost didn't notice something loosened. You stopped white-knuckling it quite so hard. Not because you gave up. It wasn't defeat. It was something quieter than that. A growing sense that forcing and creating aren't the same thing. That shift matters more than it looks. Across a wide range of spiritual traditions, this move from desperate effort to grounded trust is considered one of the earliest signs that someone has genuinely aligned with the timing of what they're waiting for. It's not passivity. It's not resignation. It's trust that's been earned through experience rather than chosen as a belief. Easy to overlook, but it tends to appear at a very specific point in the waiting, right near the beginning of the end. The next sign is one that almost everyone misreads when it's happening, and it can genuinely feel like things are getting worse. Sign number 2. Old patterns are falling away. Maybe a relationship quietly faded. Maybe a habit you'd had for years just stopped feeling necessary. Maybe ways of thinking you'd carried so long they felt like personality traits have started to feel like old clothes still there, but no longer quite fitting. This kind of clearing away can feel like loss. And in the moment, it usually does. Loss rarely announces itself as progress while it's happening. But there's a reason renovation has to involve demolition first. You can't build something new inside a space that's still full of the old thing. A lot of people who've gone through significant positive change describe this exact period, things quietly disappearing, life reorganizing at the edges as a kind of preview they didn't understand until later. The subtraction was making room for something they couldn't see yet. If things have been falling away lately, and you've been treating it as evidence that something's wrong, it may be worth reconsidering that assumption. Because what comes next tends to arrive through the doors that clearing opens. Speaking of doors, that's the next sign. And it's easier to spot than the others, but it's also easier to dismiss. Sign number 3, unexpected doors are starting to appear. Not the opportunity you've been working toward, Something sideways. A conversation that opens something you weren't expecting. A chance encounter that leads somewhere you didn't plan. A door that appeared in a wall you were pretty sure was solid. These moments are easy to file under coincidence and move on. But here's what's worth noticing. When people describe the period just before a major shift in their lives, these kinds of unexpected openings come up constantly. Small, easy to dismiss, but present. Almost like preliminary signals the future starting to make contact before it fully arrives. The reason unexpected doors tend to appear at this stage may be simpler than it sounds. When you've genuinely released the grip on one fixed outcome, you become available to notice what was always there, but invisible to someone looking only in one direction. You're not less focused, you're more open. And open is exactly the condition that lets you catch something you weren't tracking. If a door appeared recently that you didn't engineer, don't walk past it too quickly. The next sign is internal, and it's the one that tends to catch people off guard. Sign number 4. You're being tested in familiar ways. You've probably felt it. A situation that sounds like an old story. A pressure that presses exactly the old button. A moment that seems almost deliberately designed to provoke the reaction you spent years working to change. This is frustrating. Sometimes it's demoralizing. The natural response is to wonder, why is this happening again? What does it mean that this is still showing up? Here's one way to read it. Some of the oldest wisdom traditions across completely different cultures describe a version of the same phenomenon, that our deepest patterns tend to surface one final time right before we genuinely move past them. Not to knock us back, to confirm that we've actually grown. It's essentially a checkpoint, the last question on the test before the chapter closes. And the thing is, if you respond differently to that familiar pressure now than you would have 3 years ago, that's not nothing. That's evidence of real change. You may already be passing the test without realizing that's what it is. The next sign is quieter, but almost everyone who's close to a turning point reports some version of it. Sign number 5. A strange sourceless calm has settled in. This one's hard to explain, but you'll recognize it if you felt it. It's not forced optimism. It's not the decision to think positive. It's something more like a quiet settling, a sense of okayness that arrives without a specific reason to be there. You wake up and the anxiety you expected isn't quite as loud. A moment of peace shows up in the middle of circumstances that haven't changed. You feel, without being able to justify it, that things are going to be all right. People who've experienced significant turning points describe this calm as one of the most vivid things they remember from the period just before everything shifted. They didn't know why they felt it. There was no external evidence supporting it, but it was there, and looking back, it made sense. There's a reason this calm tends to appear right here. When something inside you has genuinely aligned with where you're headed, the constant, low-level resistance that's been draining your energy starts to ease. You're not fighting yourself anymore. And that absence of inner friction, that's what the calm actually is. If you've felt even a trace of this recently, what comes next is the one sign that ties all of them together, and it's the hardest to explain. Sign number 6. Something inside you simply knows, not hope. This is different from hope. Hope has a fragility to it. You can feel how easily it could break. It needs tending, needs reassurance. This is something else. It sits underneath hope, underneath fear, underneath the part of your mind that's still running the calculations. A quiet, grounded knowing that the waiting is almost over, that you're closer than you've been, that what you've been moving toward has been moving toward you at the same time. Every major wisdom tradition across history has described some version of this inner knowing, and every description lands in roughly the same place. It's not loud. It doesn't argue for itself. It tends to show up in the quiet moments, when you stop analyzing and just feel. And when it's there, it doesn't feel like a wish. It feels like a fact you can't quite source yet. Think about the last time you felt something like this. Not hope, that other thing. Where were you? What were you doing? And more importantly, is that feeling present now, underneath everything else? Some believe this knowing arrives when the distance between where you are and where you're going has finally become small enough to sense, not to see yet, just to feel. Looking at all six together, something becomes visible that's easy to miss when you look at each one in isolation. They form a sequence, not a random collection of experiences of progression, releasing the grip, old things clearing, unexpected openings, a familiar test appearing one last time, a quiet, sourceless peace, and then, that deep knowing that something has shifted, even if nothing looks different yet. What's remarkable about this sequence is that none of these signs require a dramatic external event. They live in ordinary life, quiet mornings, unexpected conversations, moments of surprising stillness. They hide inside the most ordinary experiences, which is exactly why so many people miss them entirely. Remember what this video started with. What if the signs that your patience is about to pay off aren't loud or obvious but already present? Looking at these six together, the answer starts to feel less like a question and more like a recognition. These aren't signs waiting to arrive. They're signs that tend to already be happening quietly, just below the level of notice. If several of these felt familiar, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this list, sit with that for a moment. Not to analyze it, just to acknowledge it. Waiting is genuinely one of the hardest things humans do. It asks for faith without receipts, patience without a timeline, the willingness to keep going in the absence of proof that going is working. And it almost never reveals its purpose while it's happening. It only makes sense later, looking back. But sometimes the waiting isn't empty. Sometimes the delays aren't denials, they're adjustments. Sometimes the silence isn't abandonment. It's preparation, of a kind that isn't visible from where you're standing. What you've been living through may not be as meaningless as it sometimes felt. That's not a promise about outcomes or timing. No one can give you that. But it's a genuine possibility worth holding. Because the thing you've been waiting for doesn't always arrive with any announcement. Sometimes it just appears, quietly, through the very experiences you almost filed away as nothing. And if these six signs feel familiar, you may already be a lot closer than you think.